Welcome back, Wire Monkeys. Today, we're talking about the number one rule of fiber optics. Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, estimators, project managers, IT personnel, and sometimes even customers. On this show, we're connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this on YouTube and you like this content, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the share button to be notified when new content is being put out? If you're listening to us on one of the audio podcast platforms like Stitcher or iTunes or Amazon, would you mind leaving us a 5-star rating? And if the show's not a 5-star rating, shoot me an email and let me know what I can do to make this a 5-star rated show. Right? Both of these simple little steps helps us take on that nasty algorithm so we can get this message out to more people so we can educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of the people in the ICT industry. Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are you doing? I do a live stream on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn where you get to ask your favorite RCDD, that would be me, your questions about installation, certification, design. I even do career path questions. But I can hear you now, but Chuck, I'm driving my home at 6 p.m. I don't want to get into an accident. Got you covered. They are recorded. And you can go back to the Let's Talk Cabling website and watch any of those previous episodes at your convenience. Now, this content is free and will always remain free. But if you find value in this content and you would like to help support the show, would you mind clicking on this little QR code right here where you can buy me a cup of coffee? You can even schedule a 15-minute one-on-one call with me, after hours, of course. And of course, we're always looking for corporate sponsorship. Right? So if your corporate ethics resonates with educate, encourage, and enrich, get in touch with me so we can have a talk. And finally, we also have some Amazon links on our webpage. So if you go to the Amazon links and look at some of the tools and stuff that we like, if you purchase one of those tools, we make a small little stipend off it, but you don't pay any extra for that. Fiber optics can be a complex issue, especially to somebody who hasn't been trained. But if I could just give you one tip that you could follow that would make your job easier terminating and testing fiber, would you be interested? I've got a special guest to talk about one thing you can do to ensure that your projects will have 90% less problems. Welcome to the show, Ben Hamlitsch. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you coming on and talk about this important subject of cleaning fiber. A lot of people don't realize just how important it really is. And since you work for trueFIBER, you might know a little bit about fiber. I'm just saying, right? Why don't you go ahead and give the audience a quick 30-second shot of who you are and why should we listen to you?
Well, yeah, like mentioned, my name is Ben Hamlitsch. Well, I've been in the industry for a little while now. Work with fiber optics, copper cabling. I used to work for Leviton, actually. So I'm familiar with a lot of their products and things like that. I worked for Fluke as well as a technical analyst, network technical support person. And then now I'm working here with trueFIBER. And basically we're a manufacturer, product supplier, building out product lines and building up the different types of product needs in terms of fiber optics. So altogether, probably, almost a little over 15 years in the industry. And back in 2010, I acquired my RCDD as well, and I've maintained that. So a little bit of industry experience there as well.
Very good. I for some reason, I did not know that you were an RCDD. How did I not know that?
I don't know. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's usually one of the first things I look at is to see if they have that certification. Not that it makes you any better or worse than anybody else, but being a fellow RCDD, I tend to notice that, right?
Yeah. 2010. So it's been a little while now, but
yeah, I got mine back in 1999. So I've had mine in 2 different centuries.
Man,
that makes me old. That's all that really does. Just makes me old. So let's talk about fiber cleaning. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about some fiber cleaning.
Okay.
Does a technician in the field really need to clean their fiber optic connectors?
Yeah, that's like a excellent question. Sometimes I feel like the technicians are like, you know what, this isn't super important, or maybe they're not trained that is super important. But the answer to that is yes. Now, with a slight caveat, I think in the past, a lot of times what we would kind of recommend is always clean and then check it and then plug it in or clean it again. That's was kind of the idea. The idea now is slightly different, and we may have heard of this, and some may have heard of this, like at some of the Bixie conferences as well, at some of the presenters, and it really makes a lot of sense. Is really inspect first, then clean, and then inspect again. And the reason for that is because a lot of times, coming from the manufacturer, they do a pretty good job of cleaning those end faces now. So you might inspect it and it's perfectly clean. There's no issues. If you were to introduce a whole cleaning method to it again, you might actually create more issues. So that's kind of the idea. But yes, it is very important. So if you inspect it and you see something on there in terms of whether it's dust, dirt, if you see some film or something, definitely go ahead and clean it. And there's a few different ways of doing that, which I think we'll probably get into here soon. But yeah, definitely very important. And here's like a quick little statistic that I just heard recently. It says the cause of network failures is contaminated connectors. That's the major cause, and one of the statistic was 80% of network issues is connector issues. So whether that's 100% accurate or not, but that's a huge percentage, and it's probably true because when we talk fiber optics, that is 9 times out of 10 the issue.
Do you remember where you read that?
I got that from a training that I just recently sat in on with the manufacturing company, a testing manufacturing company that makes test equipment, and that was the statistic that they just popped out there in their
Right.
on one of
And
their slides.
I think there's a lot of truth to that because, and I've said this many times on the show. I've sat in several Bixie classes, and every single time I sit in a Bixie class, they always say, 90% of all fiber optic problems are because of dirty connectors, and that's even more true so today. Back 20 years ago, when we were doing hot melts, when we were doing two-part epoxy connectors, there were other things that could happen. Like you could actually break the fiber down in because you pushed too hard with your Ruby scribe or something like that. But in today's environment, most of the connectors are going to be some type of fusion splice on connector, or that's pre-polished at the factory. Some type of mechanical connector that's pre-polished at the factory. So realistically, as long as you do the fusion splicing right or the mechanical splicing right, you got a factory polished edge there. So you're not going to have that bad cleave, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So a lot of technicians, they probably understand the rule to inspect before you connect when they're talking about, going out and plugging into an existing, fiber optic enclosure or an adapter panel or something like that. What is your recommendation? Let's say I'm doing a project and I'd open up my box with my trueFIBER parts, right? And I pull out that adapter panel, right, or those enclosures. Should I inspect those before I click anything to them?
So the adapter panels, like the feed through connectors and those types of things. Yeah. So if you've got, if anything with a connector, so anything with an end face, a fiber optic end face, so that would include like a transceiver, SFP or something like that too. Inspect it first, and then if it needs to be cleaned, definitely I'd recommend cleaning it. And so I think you can't, when it comes to this process of the installation part, when fiber optics, you can't really, in my mind, do too much in terms of inspecting and then cleaning. It's very important, and it's going to save you a lot of headaches down the road potentially.
I didn't even think about that because you mentioned checking the equipment too. I didn't even think about that because you know what, that piece of equipment might have been in place, might have been in service over a couple, 2, 3, 4 years, and you and I both know this, Ben. The IT person, they always lose those protective caps, or technicians like to call them dust caps, but they're not really dust caps; they're really protective caps, and they lose them. So now you got that end face on a piece of equipment that's being exposed to the atmosphere, which could be moisture, it could be dust, dirt, and if you're taking a brand new patch cord, you plug it in, it doesn't work. You might be thinking, well, this is a new patch cord. Why is it not working? And you might have inspected your patch cord, but you might not have inspected the equipment. So it's a good idea. I think I always tell techs all the time, inspect every patch cord, brand new, out of the bag or not, right? Every connector, because it's you can't inspect it too many times to ensure that it's clean, right? And all it takes is one time to plug a dirty. Oh, here's one I just thought of. I don't know why it just hit me. Test equipment. Make sure the test equipment's not dirty, because if you plug a brand spanking new patch cord into a piece of a test cord that's contaminated, you just cross contaminated your test cords. Right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. You cross contaminate the test cords, or the flip side of that, you have a damaged or cross contaminated patch cord, and now you're plugging that into the test equipment transceiver, and now you could cause damage to the actual transceiver on the test equipment, and that becomes a real expensive problem.
Right.
So both sides of that is extremely important.
Right. So all right. So we I think we got that covered. If it's always dirty, always assume it's dirty until you've inspected it first, and then if it's dirty, then clean it. Right. And then don't. Here's something I want to add on to that, because I got ADD today for some reason. Even after you clean it, don't just plug it in. Look at it one more time before you plug it back in, because you may not have cleaned it thoroughly enough. You might throw some stuff on there. So
ICIC is
that sounds like an acronym. What's it mean?
Inspect, clean, inspect, connect.
There you go. I like that. I absolutely like that. So what are some of the different ways that we can clean a fiber?
So there's a few different ways. There's the dry option. So that's with what a lot of times is being used out there is the click cleaners. That's kind of seems to be mostly the most common style for the dry cleaning. You also do have the cassettes, the Cleatop type cassettes that are used as well for the dry cleaning. So those are the methods for dry cleaning. Wet cleaning is another option, and that's if the dry cleaning is not working, or there's maybe some embedded dirt or something on there that needs to be removed with a little bit more, a little bit more force. The dry or the wet cleaning can be used, but what's really important, and I think it's important to mention this, is years ago isopropyl alcohol was the go-to, right? Let's use isopropyl alcohol. That's the best. Let's fiber cleaning. It's not really recommended anymore. It's recommended to use an actual fiber optic cleaning solution on the wet side, and the reason for that is it's designed specifically for cleaning fiber optics. So they've maximized the way it needs to be designed, I guess, for lack of a better word. Whereas the isopropyl alcohol, a lot of times will leave a film, or sometimes it'll leave a residue or something like that. And it's not always picked up or seen with the fiber scope. And especially if you're using a handheld, sometimes it's you can't see it. So that's really important. So on the wet cleaning, but the process for the wet cleaning is a little bit more, I guess, involved too. Is you want to make sure you want to go from wet to dry. So if you're using the wet cleaning process, you want to use the alcohol, you want to clean the end face on the wet, and then go to dry in terms of the cleaning. So those are the two kind of main ways of doing it, and then there's kind of a combination of the two, which I kind of just touched on, and that's the wet to dry process. Those should, by all intents and purposes, take care of your issue. Sometimes it doesn't, but those should.
Yeah, a lot of techs don't realize that isopropyl alcohol is hygroscopic. That's a big fancy scientific word that Jake
Like
Jones
that.
taught me. It means it absorbs moisture from the air.
Yeah.
So if you have a bottle of alcohol sitting out, it absorbs the moisture in the air, and that's left on the end face. It'll show as droplets. By the way, when you're looking at fiber end face, you really should be using a minimum of a 200 power scope to kind of check that end face out. There are 100 power scopes, and a lot of techs run with 100 power scopes, but you miss a lot of the dirt and debris. Let me ask you this, because you talked about the wet dry and the wet system and the dry system. Is one better than the other, or is there a specific application where you might want to choose one over the other?
Yeah, so I think you would choose the wet if you've inspected and you've done your first cleaning and you're not getting whatever might be on there off. So the dry is really kind of the quick, probably covers most scenarios in terms of the cleaning that you would need. But if you're inspecting it and you're just not getting it with the dry, then switch to the wet. It's a little bit more involved. It takes a little bit more time to do. So, and time is money, as we know in this industry. So, I think it's always great or good to start with what's easiest, but you may need to switch to the other, which would be the wet style cleaning. So that's kind of my take on it. If I was to be out in the field, again doing it,
Right.
is I would inspect it. If I see something, I would give it a clean with the dry click cleaner. If that doesn't do it, then I'd switch to a wet, sorry, and use that
So
option.
dry system. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Isn't there like two options? The first option be some like pre-made device, like the cassette cleaners that you were talking about earlier, or the ones that you can actually stick into the adapter panel and stuff. But also, wouldn't a lint-free wipe also qualify as dry cleaning?
Well, you can. You gotta want to make sure that lint-free wipe is fiber optic,
Right.
designed for fiber optic specifically. So it's not your shirt's not going to be that lint-free wipe,
I can't use
or
my pants.
yeah, or a napkin or something like that, because that's just going to introduce all kinds of more
Right.
problems. So yeah, make sure that it's a specific fiber optic lint-free wipe,
Right.
and absolutely those could be used. Those could be used
And
as
the
well.
reason I point that out, there's a lot of old school fiber people out there still using the lint-free wipes fiber optic lint-free wipes, obviously. My concern with using that, I'm not saying you can't. I'm not even saying you shouldn't. But my concern is when you're using that type of a dry cleaning system versus like the cassette cleaners. When you use the cassette cleaners, you know that you're always on a nice new clean spot of dry cleaning pad. If you're
That's a
using
good
that
point.
lint-free wipe, you might be going back over a piece of the lint-free wipe where you just wipe something else, and you might be cross-contaminating your connector again.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, and
And
the other thing with the clicks too, the click cleaners or those types, they're very focused in the specific zone and area that they need to clean. So they're not, you could be out with the lint wipe, you could be, you're covering the whole surface of the end face, and that could be pulling, dirt from the outside corner of the end face to the
right.
to the core or something like that. Whereas with the click cleaners, or that style, they've done a lot to really focus it on the cladding and core area in order to just make sure that that's specifically clean.
So why might it be important to inspect it first?
So that's a really good question. We've kind of touched on that a little bit, but I think it's worth reiterating for sure. You just don't know if it's going to be contaminated or if it's going to be clean already, and so the inspection first is just such an important step. If it's not dirty, there's no reason to clean it again. And that's been proven true in a lot of different scenarios and situations where it was totally clean under inspection, but they cleaned it anyway, and then someone added, dust or dirt or some sort of cross contamination, maybe even from the inspection tool itself, because wasn't cleaned. And that's another thing to maybe mention is the inspection tool being used, whether it's a video scope with a end piece that slides into the fiber connector to view the end face, or if it's an actual handheld scope with with the fiber entering the front of the scope.
Right.
Those, it's extremely important to make sure that those are clean as well. Your inspection process, which is to inspect the fiber optic end face to ensure that it's clean, could easily be contaminating the connector that you're plugging in there. So another great thing to verify and check. I think if we walk away with anything in this entire podcast, it's inspect and clean. But cleaning is so important when it comes to fiber optics. It's a end game solution.
Yeah. And if you inspect it, you can use either the handheld scope or the like you said, the fiber end face camera. My preference would be use the camera, because that way I can take a digital picture and I can document that my end faces are clean. So that way there's no future potential warranty issues or service calls because they said, oh, your connector was dirty. Nah, it was clean. Here's the picture. See, I remember I sent it to you in the email. So yeah, my preference is always to have some type of a fiber scope that's got the ability to take pictures, right?
Yeah. So the handhelds, they were really popular, years back, and they're still used. You were mentioning 100x, and I think 200x is kind of the more common for multi-mode, and then if you're doing single mode, 400x on the handhelds.
Right.
But video scopes are coming down in price, quite a bit, more and more. And if you're looking to invest in something, really that's the way to go. The other nice thing about it is, like you just said, for documentation purposes, most of these video scopes, if they're any kind of quality video scope, they're going to actually test to the IEC standard. They're going to give you, a breakout and really kind of isolate the core and the cladding in terms of how that test procedure process goes. It's gonna give you a grading, a pass fail, that type of a thing. So that's really, in my opinion, the better way to go when it comes to inspection.
Gotcha. So I'm always harping codes and standards, and most people can't tell you the difference between codes or standards. Codes are for safety, minimum quality construction. Standards are for performance, right? So you should always follow the standards because they will always exceed the code book. What do the standards say when it comes to cleaning fiber? Because I know the code says nothing about it.
Yeah, so that's just recently changed a little bit. At least the IEC standard has just recently changed a little bit. The 61300 3-35. They got the big old long
easy
name
for you
there.
to say.
Yeah, right. And so, but it used to be real stringent, in the core and the cladding and all that were kind of combined into a single type of test, and it was the slightest micron of dirt and dust, which we don't want that, but it was almost impossible sometimes to pass that test. Well, they've changed it. Their edition 3, they've made some slight changes to that. They've allowed they've isolated the core to its own cleaning. They've isolated the cladding to its own cleaning. So they've done that in terms of what is allowed and what's pass fail. They've actually, something interesting that they added that wasn't there before, that I thought was interesting, is that after numerous cleans, and they don't give a number, but say 2 or 3 cleanings, and you've seen something that's still there, but it's not affecting the performance. So maybe you run a loss length test or an OTDR, and the performance is there. They say go ahead and pass that cable or past that end face as a pass, even though you might see something. It could be something that maybe in the cladding that's slightly embedded or something like that, but it's not affecting the core. Those are some of the key takeaways that I kind of noticed in the new IEC endface standard.
Website that's forward facing to the customer, which covers those IEC things that we were just talking about, by any chance?
Yeah, we do have a couple articles that have been written
Okay.
on fiber cleaning. So yeah, you can go to the website trueFIBER.com. We have a fiber forum there, and in that fiber forum, there's a whole list of various different articles on different topics. But yeah, there's two specific ones on fiber optic cleaning. They don't. One of them needs to be a little bit updated with this new IEC standard. Some of the changes that were made, but generally speaking, they have all the information we're discussing here pretty much.
Do me a favor, after the show, send me those links,
Okay.
and I'll put them in the show notes down below. So that way, if somebody's hearing this, they can go look at the show notes and they can find the links directly to those videos.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
So last question, so we know that we really should be cleaning fiber, but does that really contribute to the fiber performing better?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? Because you're like, I'm doing all this work, is it worth it? and the answer is absolutely. So one of the things we talked about isopropyl alcohol earlier, and one of the things too that they found is that if there's a film or a residue of isopropyl alcohol left on the end face, and that gets plugged into a transceiver, on some of these higher bandwidth transceivers, getting into 40, 100, 400, 800 gig, they're pushing a lot of power through those transceivers over the fiber optic cable, and that residue can create heat. So as that's exiting the transceiver, it can create heat, and that can actually could destroy or cause damage to the transceiver. So that's on the isopropyl side. On the cleaning side, obviously, if you're working with single mode and you haven't properly cleaned it, or there's dirt or something on it, we're talking the smallest speck of dust can completely kill your signal. We have an 8-micron core. I mean, if we think about the size of that, your hair is about what, 16 micron?
I don't
Somewhere in
know.
there.
I can't speak on that. I don't
Yeah,
have any hair.
maybe bigger than that, 60, somewhere like that.
No, I think you're right. I
Is
think your number's right.
Yeah, somewhere in there for the size of your hair. I mean, think about that. It's tiny. Well, this is far smaller than that.
Right.
So extremely important because of what it can do to your network, how it can degrade your network. And sometimes your network will still perform, but you see a big performance dip or a degradation in your system because of that. So again, extremely important from an application standpoint, from a use case standpoint, to ensure that your network is performing optimally.
Great advice, Ben. I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Any final parting thoughts you'd like to share? Anything new trueFIBER's bringing out that you want to just kind of say, hey, we're coming out with something new?
Well, nothing new, so to speak, but continuously growing. The trueFIBER product line, coming out with new products. Really encourage people to check out the Fiber Forum, which I'm going to give you there with the links. Lots of technical information and articles on there that I think are, could be beneficial to installers and end users and anybody out there that's looking to get into working with fiber optics.
Excellent. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks a lot. Happy to be here.
So I hope you understood from that whole entire episode that keeping your fiber clean will keep you from having 90% of the problems that you have with terminating fiber. Till next time, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.